on this computer. Okay, so John Portman, an architect who was very different in the sense that he was also his own mecena, so to speak, or the Medici, because he was also the developer. He actually built for himself most of the time. I mean, it's actually incredible, and not little buildings, but huge. So, you know, this is quite a change to build for yourself, you know, incredibly large, emphatic public buildings. I think he is a little bit too commercial for my taste, but he does have qualities. And even the intelligentsia of architecture and critics agree that there is something to some works by Portman that are not to be ignored. We'll see. We'll see some of his works. He built a lot. I understood he also painted. He also lived a very long life. He lived over 90. I mean, he was 93 when he died. What a man. Well, I don't know about that artificially colored hair and other things, but you know, men, especially men, or not just men, when they grow older, they try to retain youthfulness desperately, one way or another. Anyway, so Portman incurred the mistrust of critics and his fellow professionals, in particular for combining the role of developer and architect. Well, they were jealous. He was dangerously conflicted, they thought. For Portman, development was a means to achieve his artistic goals. Architecture is what I'm about, was one of his declarations. He also said, I came to the conclusion that if I were to have an impact and not just be part of a process I could not control, I should understand the entire project from conception through completion. That led me to real estate. On another occasion, he put the same point, pithily but grandiosely, like this: I am the Medici to my own Leonardo. Anyway, he succeeded in a way, but we'll see. We'll see. I think there are some question marks here and there. Although his work is considered neo-futurist, and this is not necessarily you know, something pejorative, because futurism is you know, not many people are connected with what the word might mean. So John Calvin Portman Jr. was an American neo-futuristic architect and real estate developer, widely known for popularizing hotels and office buildings with multi-storied interior atria. Portman also had a particularly large impact on the cityscape of his hometown of Atlanta, with a Peachtree Center complex serving as downtown's business and tourism anchor from the 1970s onward. The Peachtree Center area includes Portman-designed Hyatt, Westin, and Marriott hotels. Portman's plans typically deal with primitives in the forms of symmetrical squares and circles. Here he is, the happy architect with a complex of buildings he built in Atlanta. Actually, this complex of buildings is not bad at all. I think I begin with some images of his atriums, because they are very impressive. There's some kind of a vertical caves. That's how I call them. And you know, he was a revolutionary in this respect at that time. But because he built for himself, he afforded something like this. You know, I mean, no other so-called beneficiary would do something like this, because it would increase enormously the cost. But he didn't care, because he had the money and he built for himself. And I'm very happy actually that he didn't care, that he was not stingy, that he had a vision. You might agree with his vision or not, but he implemented the vision. And I think we can admire him for this. These are huge, you know, spaces that evoke something that transcends the functionalism or the function of the building. And I'm still wondering exactly what he wanted to say with these vertical caves. I know he was very fond of the public dimensions of life. And I think rightfully so, because what would life be if we only had, individualities and isolations? We also need interaction, togetherness. Now here the togetherness is more in feeling and visually, but otherwise, this building is also, I think, some kind of a metaphor for I don't know, the unknown, or the abyss of what is the afterlife, or obliquely and metaphysically to evoke publicness. I don't know, but they are impressive. What is less impressive, I think, is that sometimes his elevators are rather vulgar in terms of shape. And anyway, this is the man, and this is one of his unbelievably large atriums. Now, the question is, these are hotels, and to glorify a hotel in such a way is a little bit debatable, in my opinion. And these are not cathedrals, but I like this image. I do like it, and I'm just a little bit disappointed that they are actually just hotels, although Marriott hotels. But what is a Marriott hotel? It's a very commercial enterprise. It's literally about making money. Although he lost money, so to speak, here because he wanted, I think he was honest when he said, architecture is all about me, or I am all about architecture. So he identified himself with architecture. And I think he was honest, because only someone who does have a deep connection with architecture will do something like this, particularly in the context of him paying for this. And so, yeah, I think he loved architecture. Anyway, this is a center in China, a later work. He really built a lot, and this is a rather short introduction to his work. I was never very fond of Portman, but I think he is worthy of talking about and knowing his work. So this is, again, a very large development in China that he did. And, I think the prisms are fine. I'm not so sure about those endings at the top. I think that he becomes a little bit shaky. But otherwise, the silhouettes are fine, and it's a large, as you can see, it's a large complex of buildings. On the right, of course, you see Rem Koolhaas. I don't think he did a bad job. I think he did a good one. I am just not very sure about what's going on here, but maybe it's good that he betrayed the so-called purity of the prisms with something a little different. There seems to be a certain honesty and integrity to the buildings, and that is not something to overlook. I mean, I find it a little bit too easy, too comfortable, this termination of the building. Otherwise, I think it is okay. But it's not easy to do a great building. So, sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. But all in all, his work is, it is a little bit simplistic, with the exception of those vertical caves, as I call them. This is from that site, South China Morning Post, and you see it's already it's a picture after the pandemic started. So here is the architect. I understood that he also paints. I never saw his abstract paintings, but I would be curious. So architecture is not about things, it is about people and life. John Portman said to the Dean of the Graduate School of Design at Harvard, Mohsen Mostafavi, who is of an Iranian origin, so to speak, in a wide-ranging interview that starts off the provocative book, Portman's America and Other Speculations, published last year by, I don't know when that last year was, but I think recently, Lars Müller. Portman's words are not notable in themselves. They are the kind of cliched line almost every architect has uttered at one time or another. What makes them striking is how passionately Portman believed in them. Now let's go back to the first line. Architecture is not about things, it is about people and life. I think he's right. Um, and if the main goal of your architectural gesture is what he means by people and life, then the chances that you don't do something very static or very, inanimate or very dead. The Marriott, but there are paradoxes here because I am questioning myself how much life actually is in this global planetary tourism that took place until the pandemic. These huge Marriott Marquis hotels that populate various cities in the world. Are they really about people and life, or are they not rather about money and making money? This hotel actually I entered once, but only on in the lobby. It's huge. You don't even realize its dimensions, from the outside. And look at that elevator, which is like a little object, advancing towards the sky. I don't know. I mean, there is some kind of a, in my opinion, and sorry for the harsh words, vulgar triumphalism here. I mean, this picture tells us, the human being is godlike and can travel anywhere and live in a marquee Marriott hotel like a king and a queen, and who cares that the rooms cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Let's ravish the earth with our well-to-do lives. And I'm not jealous. I think a hotel could be more modest, even in Manhattan. But still, that interior space, that vertical space, that atrium is interesting, and that's what he brought, to this program, the hotel. So there is in my opinion, a non-critical exuberance here that, yeah, I understand sometimes exuberance should not be critical. In fact, maybe often, but here is an exuberance that I find it a little bit close to Walt Disney and Las Vegas. In fact, his architecture was named, Disney architecture for adults. A little bit malicious, this statement. But he has force. I mean, look at the building. And again, he built it for himself. I mean, it is incredible. He obviously was very skilled at real estate. But what does it mean to be skilled at real estate? To be able to make transactions that are very lucrative. In essence, it's not about art, it's about money and making money. But he was a unique case, really, where, indeed, he was the Medici and Leonardo, as he put it, or we could have said another artist or architect from the Renaissance, equally great. So this is the plan, yeah, it's a triumphalist architecture. And the only question I have is, do we need triumphalism in this field? I don't know. Anyway, the climate change is here with us and probably to remain, and so is the rising level of the seas. and so is, you know, the crisis with nature, the abuses of nature. But again, if I look at this abstracted picture, I do see, a certain virility in the good sense of the word, and power. Um, but again, I have to say this little short word, but, because I think a truly great work is one that combines the spirit of geometry or will or willfulness with the spirit of fineness or grace. If you just have will, you have force, but is it enough? Is not. You also have to have what the word grace means, and that means a certain sensitivity that knows how to question a little bit this display of excessive power, which, because of its function, also is. I mean, a pyramid should be as it is, but this is a hotel, for God's sake. The Atlanta Marriott Marquis Hotel. This is a hotel that made him famous. And indeed, these vertical spaces are impressive, and they are not as simplistic. They are not simplistic. You see, the geometry is, at times contorted, and so he took risks. And look, this is the interior space. It's incredible. He did it. This is a Portman hotel. He must have felt very secure financially, to do something like this. Can you imagine a so-called regular architect, doesn't matter how talented, and even doesn't matter how audacious, drawing something like this, when he didn't have the money for something like this. So, this is a pharaonic enterprise done by a man who had probably pharaonic amounts of money, or he was able to bring it to the project in some forms. No, he was rich, but I don't know if I don't know. It worked. For him, it worked. And you see, the building does have, I actually like more this building here than this one, with its more reticent geometry, but still there is strength. This one is also okay, I would say, but still, when I think that it's the Triumphalist Hotel, I get a little bit turned off. I would have liked it to be something else. When Kenzo Tange, for example, built the St. Mary Cathedral in Tokyo, which is much smaller, and he used concrete, exposed concrete and so on, it worked because it was a cathedral. I mean, that cathedral built by Tange was much more modest than this. You would say this hotel is. I mean, what is it celebrating? This hotel really? It is celebrating killing one's time. But when you think about Philip Johnson saying, I prefer to build another skyscraper than to lay on the beach on a chaiselong or on whatever, then you wonder what are the great virtues of these giant structures built for tourism. And now, from the perspective of the climate change, we know very well the consequences of this globalist traveling. Of course, we benefited from it, but at the expense of, weakening the level of ozone, and have a lot of pollution and a lot of problems with the climate. So I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's a so-called powerful building. The question is, does this building with its functions deserve such an ostentatious display of so-called power? I'm not so convinced about this. Because from here to the Trump's casinos, Atlantic City and so on, is a very short distance. It is close to a cultural bonanza. Except that here the bonanza also has some architectural virtues because of the fact that the developer was also an architect, and I would say an architect with some skill. I like these buildings. I like these visceral, buildings of the vertical, of the atriums, the vertical caves, as I call them. Because in a way, imagine you are a tourist here going to your room and, looking into this void. So the void, in a way, is negating a little bit the amplitude of your so-called achievement by being a planetary tourist. Maybe the void represents something within the architect, aware that what he calls life is not the only thing here on the earth, that there is also something else beyond life or afterlife. What would be the meaning of this huge void? Because that's what it is, a huge void. It's a crater. This feature is his most important contribution to architecture. And it's something worth reflecting on, I think. What is strange, perhaps, is that I didn't see too many pictures with too many people here. These structures, obviously, in order to be, to function, they needed a lot of tourists, and probably they did have. But most pictures I found were kind of devoid of people. Those very people he mentioned as being the main goal or the raison d'etre of architecture. Another here at Regency in Atlanta, another hotel, another mega hotel. We see a person there, yes, contradicting a little bit what I said, but it's just one person actually underlining what I just said. The building is okay, I guess, but I don't know about this space capsule here. It's really, I don't know. It's really Las Vegas, and I cannot appreciate this. But I appreciate that atrium, yes, that vertical cave. That I do. I also appreciate the facade. The elevation here is simple, but it has a rigor, and it has I don't know. It's balanced. I think it's rather okay. But again, he comes up with these things that some people might call futuristic or neo-futuristic. To me, they are closer to science fiction and not truly the noblest kind of architecture, in my opinion. Now, what is truly positive here is the space itself, not the shape, the of the elevators, and I still think he could have used less, you know, so-called interesting elevators. He could have had, I don't know, rectangular elevators, something. But I guess he wanted, so-called accents of some visual interest. But I find them vulgar. So this was from 1967. What you see here is from 1967. That's how it looked like. The same hotel, this one, but from the picture is from 1967. Consume, consume, consume. Have a good time. Okay. Now my question is it why we are on this earth to fool around, to consume, 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 and abuse the earth, abuse the air, abuse everything, just to have fun, fun, fun. If this is what Mr. Portman means by life, I don't know. I like to think that maybe life should have other, um, reasons to be. The Peachtree Center in Atlanta which is, you see the happy developer, and he does look like a developer, almost infuriatingly so. Anyway, but I like this picture. This picture in particular, I like. It is monumental, but it also has some kind of a fragmentation. There is a rectangularity here, but there is also certain variation. I don't know. I like it. I think it's a good architecture. What I see here, I think it's a good architecture. I don't know exactly what is happening in the middle here because I don't have the plans. But I mean, this dimension is big, and in the center probably. I know there are no atriums here. I think of that size that we saw in those hotels. But this group of buildings interests me, particularly from the point of view that this picture was taken. Now, Hyatt Regency in San Francisco. This is also interesting. It's a little bit different from the previous ones, and I think it shows that John Portman was able to take risks, and he still cultivated the atrium, the large dimensions atrium, the vertical cave, but here he plays with the plane. So it's this building here, and yeah, I think it's interesting what is going on here. I imagine he did all these buildings here. It's not bad. I look at the site plan, and again, I don't know what's going on here because there is no spacing between these trees. So I don't know. But I would be very curious. I didn't have time to investigate these buildings. This one, we'll look at this one in more in detail, and you see a section. Yeah, I think the way he ends his buildings at the top is a little bit simplistic, and he could have done better, I think. But that's what I think. I could be wrong. But the building, this is a rendering from his office. It is, acceptable at a time when human beings thought that they are the shepherds of everything on earth, and that they can do anything. And so there was a certain optimism, and that became inflated over time. But still, this building is more interesting than most of the buildings around it. So in Atlanta, even M. Kohlhaas wrote about it. There was some kind of experiment, urban experiment that took place, and John Portman was heavily involved with what was happening in Atlanta. Georgia. I imagine in the case of a hotel, so concerned with making money, it was not very easy, to make an architecture that was, maybe if I am to use such a language, excessively pure. So levels of vulgarity even were probably unavoidable. But still, here we have these diagonals of audacity, which must be admired, I think. Now, with such a name, I think the name also helps. If your name is John Portman, I mean, somehow the name itself has a certain power, and it shows also in the buildings he built. Now, other people might have been called John Portman or something similar and not build anything. Well, he did. So Disneyland for adults, someone wrote, these are not my words, John Portman's dizzying interior legacy. Yes, but the word Disneyland is a little bit, I mean, it's hard to divorce the word Disneyland for some pejorative connotations. Atlanta is the future. At least makers of films and TV series think so, especially those who create visions of times to come. In The Hunger Games, The Walking Dead, and Divergent, the city appears unnamed as the setting for omnipotent rulers and dark deeds. Sometimes you see its towers, sometimes soaring, swirling atria of unreadable scale. They tend to convey megalomania, dystopia, and disorientation. This cinematic Atlanta was shaped by one man in particular, the architect developer John Portman, who until he died last year, that's when the text was written, spent almost all his 93 years in the city. The hotels, malls, and offices that from the early 1960s started to define the downtown, the Merchandise Mart, the Hyatt Regency Hotel, the Peachtree Center, the Marriott Marquis are his work. These were not just profitable commercial ventures. Portman ended up with a personal wealth of hundreds of millions of dollars, but in his eyes, works of art. On the other hand, considering the Renaissance Center he built in Detroit, I found this wording: urbanists that forgot the urban, John Portman's legacy in Detroit. So you'll see now images of the Renaissance Center in Detroit, triumphalist, some might say powerful, although in my opinion, true power is about something else. And I think Lao Tzu or Lao Tse would have agreed. But this was Detroit at a time when was not ravished by despair, as it is now. And what can we say? In a way, it's a frightening kind of a renaissance, because it's so without doubts. This is, I think, problematic. When you have no doubts, you build like this. And I don't know. Should we banish doubts completely? Renaissance Center, atrium at street level, courtesy of John Portman and Associates. This is the plan. It's perfectly symmetrical, and there's some interest, because there are some curves used and the rotations at 45 degrees. And yes, but all for the glory of what? To have fun, to have a good time. This is a rendering, but the building was built kind of like this. And here are some people having fun in Detroit, although Detroit shouldn't really be the city to have fun in. For a number of years, it was ravished by the car manufacturing being exported to China. Renaissance Center, the diagram of interior walkways. Renaissance Center, the site plan. This is his architecture. It is such a difference between Portman and Kahn. Louis Kahn also worked with rotations, with symmetries. But in the case of Louis Kahn, you have, well, it's true, Kahn was a very different kind of man because he was born very poor. In Latvia, he crossed the ocean, and his face was ravished by a fire accident where, he became disfigured. And as his friend Vincent Scully, the important historian and theorist of architecture, said, in the case of Louis Kahn, there was the meeting between laser light and a candle light. What does this mean? It means the light of technology, but also the humblest form of light, which is the candle. Well, we cannot say the same thing about Portman. In the case of Portman, I don't know if you see the laser, but you certainly do not see the candle. Another, the street level plan. and the intermediate level of the same so-called Renaissance Center. Strangely, the Renaissance Center was built before, when it was actually a great need for a Renaissance, because Detroit fell apart dramatically, and the podium level, and so on. Yes, triumphalist architecture for the city, which was famous for its automobile industry. You know, the T-Ford model that began the disaster called taking over the world by the car, which also provoked the war in Iraq and many other, who knows what, you know, because of the obsession with gas. You know, now we might create some cars that are electrical, but still, we still ravage the earth in order to get the oil, in order to make the gas that the cars use. So the Renaissance was, you know, excessively, I would say, optimistic. I mean, the Renaissance in Detroit. Okay, thank you. And now I go to a French woman of Italian origin. Well, she wasn't a French architect, but Italian origin, interesting architect, and great. I have seen two buildings by her, but actually the buildings were not by her, but she transformed them for a different function. It was the station in Paris, Musée d'Orsay, that became Musée d'Orsay, and she was the architect who did the interior transformation of the station, railway station, and then she also did the refurbishment, or the, you know, the transformation of the museum of in Barcelona, Museum of Medieval Art, I think it is called, or Catalan art. Both are great. I have been in both buildings, and she did a marvelous job. But we will begin with a few images with her design, you know, industrial design or object design, furniture design. This is the lady, and yeah. So we start with a chair. She designed in 1962, and I think Ms. van der Rohe was right when he said that at least sometimes a chair is more difficult to do than a skyscraper. To refer to John Portman, maybe a chair sometimes, not always, might be more difficult to do than a Portman hotel. I don't know. And I don't know if this particular chair, but this is how she started in 1962, a rocking chair, which is, you know, has a certain playfulness, but I don't know. I don't find it truly amazing. And it's probably very expensive. I see that leather there, and anyway. This is done by Aulenti, if I am to pronounce her name in French. Aulenti, Italian. And I'm not even attempting to pronounce her first name because I don't know. Gae, I guess, G-A-E. Anyway, so this is the chair by this important architect. There are books, and I even have one myself on her works. She's not, you know, an unidentifiable woman architect. No, she created a name for herself, and she's honored for that. And she was a very good designer. And I repeat, those two buildings that I saw, the Musée d'Orsay. In fact, I don't think I saw many museums of that quality. She didn't create the buildings though, but she transformed them. She designed them for the function of housing collections, art collections. This is another sitting that she created, and I think is fine. You know, it's you know, joyous little piece of sitting, a little chair. She was a skillful designer, no doubt. And many architects design chairs. So I think we should launch a competition in between ourselves, and we'll invite other people as well. New chair, because I really think to try to design a chair is very interesting, is very rewarding, and even therapeutic, because I don't know, a chair becomes very personal. If once you arrive at a certain design, I think you arrive at the conclusion that the chair says something about who you truly are. Just like a pair of shoes after you wear it for a while. And that's why Vincent van Gogh painted the chairs in his room, or a chair in his room. There are famous paintings by Van Gogh with a chair. That chair says something, is actually almost a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh. A chair designed by an architect could also be some kind of a self-portrait of the architect. She also designed a table and another version of the same chair, which is, you know, it has integrity, is logical, is maybe even moderately comfortable. Now we arrive at a lamp table, table lamp from 1965. Here somehow I almost see her face in this lamp. I don't know why. There is something about this lamp that I can say it's hers. It cannot be done by another architect. It's hers. But I already know it's hers. Maybe I'm wrong in what I just said. Anyway, objects. Those very objects that John Portman said that architecture is not about. But we need objects too. A jumbo table from 1965. Yes. So this one is a little bit postmodernistic. I think those corners are a bit too heavy, in my opinion, and unjustifiably so. But if we have Italian marble at our disposal, unending quantities, I guess we can do something like this too. I don't find this one very graceful, actually. But it is a little bit interesting in the sense that very few tables I saw like this, where the corners are emphasized through the legs in this way. And it's a low table. It's not, anyway, the Fontana art, the Parola lamps, there is a certain flamboyance, this, look at the roundness of that lamp, there is some kind of moderate, if I can say so, a moderate triumphalism here, even though it's just a lamp. But anyway, we'll come closer to showing some of her architecture. Although again, she didn't build buildings; she transformed existing buildings into something like in the case of Orsay, Musée d'Orsay, and the museum in Barcelona are quite good. Another, strange design, and in this case, I think the word strange is maybe justified, because he placed the table on those wheels, and I don't know. I find it a little bit questionable. It is whimsical, but I don't know. I really don't know if it is one of the tables that I like the most. And again, it's a table not far away, removed from the slab, from the horizontal surface it sits on, and you even wonder, what's the difference? Maybe we should go back to the Japanese way of doing things, appreciating the horizontal surface without elevating another horizontal surface, not too many centimeters from it, like in this case. I don't know. In my opinion, this is not great design. Sorry, I mean, happy birthday. It is your birthday, Ms. Aulenti or Aulenti, but this design for me is not one of the greatest. But we'll find an even more extreme one using the same idea is this one. And I guess she played with a dichotomy between mobility and stability. So here we have the legs are mobile, and then hopefully the table itself is stable enough so you can put something on it without you know, having the glass of water or orange juice or milk spilled all over the table and the floor. But it is a strange idea to put you know, and it's probably not even so easy to move, despite the fact that it has four wheels like a car. I don't know. Anyway, so you can take some interesting pictures, I guess. All right, so we move forward. I'm anxious to see some buildings, but unfortunately, as I said, she didn't build too many buildings. This vase is interesting because of the colors she used and the texture. Otherwise, it's basically a sphere or almost a sphere. But I like the way she treated the glass. You know, I like this. I like what I see here. I think I'm not so sure about the shape, but tectonics in a way that of the vase, if I can say so, are interesting. And the Olivetti Showroom in Paris, 1965. Well, the space itself is maybe not so impressive, or maybe it is. It is white and it has that reddish part. But you have the Olivetti objects and some art, and then it becomes interesting. And even her lamp, you see the Olivetti typewriters. You know that Olivetti produced great typewriters. It's 60s. It's the 60s. You know, it's a kind of a, when you look back, you know, nostalgia is difficult to avoid because, you know, the typewriters are gone. We have now PCs and laptops and so on. Anyway, this is the Olivetti showroom by Aulenti. And here it is with a view from the street. It's refined design here, I would say, yes. Now, Musée d'Orsay. This I had been once in this museum, and I felt very comfortable. And I usually am anxious in museums, but here I felt very, very well. And I think it's because of her, because she did transform this great building that was a station into a great museum. And it is an excellent work, and it might be her most important work. Although, as I said, the building was not built by her, but what you see there, like modernistic parts of this building, those are done by her. And I think she understood well how to have a dialogue with a you know, with a covering of the space, and even a dialogue with the history of the building, which was, you know, not so recent. So it's an interplay between her intervention and the existing building that I think worked out very well. And here she is. If I remember well, there are some great sculptures by Auguste Rodin here, and I love Auguste Rodin. If you go to Paris once the pandemic is over, let's hope it will be, please do not forget to visit Musée d'Orsay, because it is a very important museum, and she did an excellent job here. Maybe the positive impression I had also derived from the fact that you kind of feel that hybrid function or character of the building, because it was once a station and now it is a museum. And I'm not saying that you almost expect that the train will arrive here, you know, in the center of the museum, but you have a feeling that this was somehow not made first to be a museum, and it became a museum. That's why perhaps the obsession with function or functionalism is not totally justified. Maybe Bernard Tschumi was right when he said form follows fiction. So he replaced the word function with the word fiction. It's not easy, in my opinion, to interact with an existing building in such a successful way. I don't know what she did here. I searched for pictures for the, of course, the Georges Pompidou Center was not done by her. I think she probably worked on some rooms, some interiors. I don't know. Now the Palazzo Grassi renovation that she was responsible of in Venice, 1985, 1993. I don't have truly great pictures, but I have some. And just like in Barcelona, I think she did a good job to accommodate and negotiate with the existing building. And you know, it's pleasant to see this interaction between contemporary art and the building that was not built now or in the previous century, but earlier. The National Art Museum of Catalonia. This is the museum I mentioned in Barcelona that I think she did a great job. And especially the section dedicated to medieval art, I was very impressed by. I like this museum a lot when I had the chance to see it. The National Art Museum of Catalonia. That's how it looks like from the outside. It is impressive, it is big, but this was not built by her. She just worked inside the building, but I think she did it very skillfully. She knew where to stop herself and allow art to have the last word. And this shows discretion and you know, skill. Maybe it is also the femininity, you know, maybe women understand better such operations. Maybe a man would have been more brutal and less skillful. I don't know. There is a tenderness here that I admired. And I know when I was in this museum, I really enjoyed looking at the artworks, and the architecture was just a discrete support for that art. Although discrete, but not without a discrete personality. She is present here, but she just knows or knew when to stop. So the main goal here is to look at the art, and the art is very well displayed, and it's very pleasant to walk through this museum. And look at the ceiling. You know, it is a creation. It's not you know, a banal ceiling. It is a creation. But if something indeed asserts itself, is the artwork on the wall, and the ceiling is having some kind of you know, spirited dialogue with everything, but is still distant from distracting from what the purpose is here, to see the art. And this is the oval room, is an impressive room, a large space. She also, you know, took care of this space, and I think she did well. And this dialogue between her interventions and the existing building is one properly done. Now, it's not very clear to me what she did for this villa. I couldn't find information. I found some pictures. I imagine she worked for some landscaping around. Is an interesting place, a ruin, you know, very romantic, lush with nature. I don't know exactly what she did here, but this work is mentioned in relation with her. I love ruins, and so here it almost doesn't matter you had or didn't have here Aulenti. present here. Still, the room is impressive, probably inside, but I didn't find pictures of the inside are modernized, and that's probably where she did some works. It's an interesting idea to live in a ruin and to bring some levels of modernity within that ruin. The Museum of Asian Art in San Francisco, another existing building that she didn't design, but she designed some rooms, at least some spaces within the museum. And again, like in the previous cases, she was reticent, but not reticent to the level of not expressing something from within herself. And I think for this kind of job, she was great. She didn't do funny things. She didn't, assert her individuality detrimentally for the existing building. No, she knew where to stop, and this is shows wisdom and skill. Apparently, she did this. This is her intervention here. Why exactly she did this so tall, I don't know, but they do look interesting, and they do look different in a way. And we are approaching the end. That's it. So I thank you for your presence today. We said happy birthday to I would say interesting architects. Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Antonia. Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you, Emanuel. Thank you, Juana. And thank you, Bazar.